So before we start our experiment, let's just have a look at the water cycle and what it actually is. So the water cycle is looking at how we create rain, how the atmosphere creates rain for us. So we start with the sun, and the sun directs its heat down to the water's surface. Yeah? So we start with the heat of the sun and the liquid, the water, the sea. So as it heats the surface of the water, we start to get a little bit of a chemical reaction. The liquid turns into a gas through what we call evaporation. So it goes from the sea and it evaporates into the air, into a gas, and rises up into the atmosphere, into the sky. Now, when it's in the sky, it starts to form into vapor or water droplets. Because it's quite cold up here and it was quite warm down here, the change in temperature causes what we call condensation to occur. And when condensation occurs, we create clouds. So clouds are an accumulation of water vapor as gas settles in the cooler atmosphere. So as the condensation or the water vapor starts to form a cloud, if the cloud gets too heavy and saturated, that means that it's filled up with this water vapor, it becomes too heavy and it starts to rain, and that's what we call precipitation. Yeah, when the rain starts to fall, it doesn't just fall in the form of the water vapor, the water droplets. It also forms in a solid, snow or hail. So it goes from a liquid to a gas to a water vapor, which is a liquid, back to water droplets, which is a liquid again, or into a solid, snow and hail. And it falls from the sky out of the clouds down back towards the ground. Now, as it falls to the ground, a couple of things can happen. As it rains, it might rain onto these mountains that we have here in the background. It might form some snow. It might melt and then begin to form a stream of water, which we call surface runoff, and begin to flow back down to the ground via gravity and diffusion. It draws the water back down to the ground. Now, as it gets to the ground, a couple of things can happen. We either have groundwater overflow, which is where rivers and streams flow back towards the sea and join back to that big body of water that it began the cycle in. We also have the soil, which absorbs some water, and then we have what we know as infiltration, where the water goes all the way through the soil down into the ground and gets picked up by this tree's roots just here. Let me move this to the side. Now, what can happen as this tree starts to absorb the water from the soil? It lets out a certain amount of water as a gas back into the air, which is known as transpiration. And this rises up into the atmosphere once more and it forms back into these clouds. So once it reaches the ground, it can either go towards the trees and all of the greenery, or it can come down into the ground, come into the groundwater overflow and flow back into the liquid, the body of water there. So it's really interesting that we start with a liquid which becomes a gas, which rises up and becomes a liquid once more. It can either fall to earth as a liquid or a solid. Remember, we have snow and hail. It comes back to the surface or the earth as a liquid once more, and it transfers back to a liquid or comes back to a gas and comes back into the air and starts all over again. So this whole cycle is really important. So like I said, it's important to realize that not only do we have changes in states of matter, and matter is these three entities at the top: liquid, vapor or water, which is a liquid too, a gas, and also a solid when it becomes a snow. But this whole cycle continuously happens all over the world. Very, very interesting. So at the end of our experiment, I'll put a picture up and I'll see if you can relabel my diagram using these very important words: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, transpiration, remember that one's all about the trees, surface runoff, infiltration, coming back to the soil, and groundwater overflow and runoff. Beautiful. Let's have a look at my experiment next. So my experiment for you today is all about this part of the water cycle, where the condensation settles into clouds, where the clouds get so saturated and heavy with the water vapor and droplets that it starts to make precipitation, rainfall. So I've got a clear bucket of water here, and I've put on top some shaving foam. So as you can see, my shaving foam is my clouds. The clear water is the air just above the surface of the earth. I've got some colours here, food colouring, and we're going to put some droplets of food colouring into my clouds to show you what happens when the clouds get so heavy with the water vapour that it starts to fall down from the clouds and into the air to form rain. So because I've got some white and blue clouds here, I probably won't use the blue one, it probably won't come out that well, but I will use some green and red to show you. So I'm using a pipette, one of these squeezy pieces of science equipment. Now I'm going to put my pipette into my clouds and I'm going to start to drop my green dye in. Can you see what's happening? Can you see the dye beginning to transfer from the clouds down towards the surface of the earth, which would be the bottom of my bucket here? I'm going to do the same with the red to show you again. I'm going to pop my pipette into the clouds, release my red dye, and we can start to see what happens when the clouds get so heavy with water vapor. It begins to transfer down through the sky as precipitation, rainfall. There we go, into the air. Can you see the red forming now? Pretty cool, huh? You know what? Just for effect, I'm going to do the blue as well, just to show you. Make it rainbow. So imagine that this cloud has been forming. All of the water vapor through the condensation in the air has started to get too heavy for this cloud. And it's going to begin to drop the water to the surface of the earth. How cool is that? If I grab a torch, we can shine some light and you can see the rainfall and all of the colours. Can you see all of the colours beginning to fall? If I turn it around a bit, we might be able to see. Let me grab my iPad and show you a bit clearer. So from a different angle, I'll show you again. In my clear bucket, you can see I've got my shaving foam clouds. They're a little bit blue in colour, so let's try the red one first. So in my pipette, I've got some red food colouring. Now I'm going to put my pipette into the cloud and squeeze my dye. Wow, can you see what's happening? Now this process is just like the rain. When the cloud gets too heavy and saturated with its water vapor, it forms droplets that falls towards the earth, which will be the bottom of our clear bucket here, and forms rain. pretty cool to watch, isn't it? And you can see that the dye, the food dye, seeps down through the cloud and into the water below. Bring you over this side and you'll be able to see the blue. Can you see the blue beginning to draw down? Just like precipitation when the water droplets fall towards the earth. So this experiment is pretty cool. It shows you what happens above you every day when it rains. And right now it's raining here in Australia, so I'm very used to the rain today. That also tells you why the rain feels so cold, because it's coming from above where the atmosphere is very cold. The temperature above the Earth's surface is a lot colder than the surface of the Earth, because at the deep center of the Earth itself, there is a molten core, and that generates a lot of heat. So that's the difference between the surface area's temperature and the area or the surface area temperature of the atmosphere above. Pretty cool to watch, hey? So I hope you enjoyed my experiment. If you want to try it at home, all you need is some food colouring, some shaving foam, a clear or a plastic jug like this one, so you can see what's happening when the rain falls from the clouds down into the air.